Hello, everybody. It's Carina from Break Fear, Find Freedom. I've got a very, very special guest today, and it's going to be an interesting kind of show because we don't really know where it's going to go to. And I always love those because that's the excitement of the show, right? But I'm not going to say much. I'm going to send it back to AJ. Let him speak a bit about who he is, where he's from, and then we'll take it from there because he's got something like really exciting hiding behind. Well, he's not really hiding behind it, but like right underneath somewhere. There's something really exciting that I think is very prevalent right now in life and with connection and communities and all those sorts of things. But I'm not speaking anymore. AJ, hello. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. I'm excited to be with you today. I'm excited to see what conversation wants to unfold here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to see you and have you here as well. So thank you for being here.
Sure.
AJ, tell us a bit about who you are and then we'll start the real conversation. Tell us who is AJ? AJ Amyx.
This is a really good question. There's a part of me that wants to give you some type of elevator pitch. I don't feel like this show is that type of show. And so, yes, I'm a coach. Yes, I'm a best-selling author. Yes, I'm a husband. Yes, I'm a father. And I'd also say I'm none of those things at the same time. And so a lot of the work that I do, and yes, I'm a brand manager at a software company too. I just kind of am. And it's just really kind of like what's going to serve this moment and what's going to serve this person that's in front of me. I've been studying I've studied spirituality for a very, very long time at a very deep level. And it kind of feels really good and really freeing. And I know this show is all about breaking fear and then finding freedom. And it feels really good when you're home and really embodying I'm nobody and I'm somebody, living in the paradox of that tension.
I love that. I love that so much. And it's so funny that how things come into your life. I don't believe in coincidence as well, there's synchronicities. And it's just like the theme that's been going through my life always, but mostly now with this, mental health, that's such a big issue, just by the way, and coaching, that's also something that's different, and everything and nothing, and this nothingness and something, and it's like it's almost like feeling where am I really, what am I doing really, and does it really matter?
Yep, I have struggled super deep with does it really matter. 2 years ago my wife was diagnosed with cancer, and so it really faced me, at least my experience of it was facing something that I had no control over. And so it really kind of begged the question, do I matter? Do I really have control? And there's a tension there. It's on one side, I do have control over how I'm choosing to respond to this moment. I have control over that. But then outside of all of that, I don't have control. And then it's well, do I matter? Well, on one side of that paradox, we fast forward 300 years from now, I probably don't matter at all, And then on the other side of that, of course, I matter because I'm choosing to matter. And it kind of brings us with, I think a lot of people in culture are wrestling with this right now. Is well, do I matter? Does what I do matter, right? As systems are starting to fall away and consciousness is, I'm not going to say it's coming online. It's just the next evolution of it, I guess you would say. And people are really wrestling with well, what is it to really matter? If I don't matter, then do I just fall to the pit of apathy and just give up, right? And it's well, which do you choose? It really is a choice, not a right or a wrong. If we want to talk about the spiritual consciousness piece of this and we zoom way out, it's on one side, it doesn't matter, but what are you going to choose? Do you want to go through this life because for whatever reason you're here? You could just be one with consciousness where you come from or where you came from. Or are you just going to I'm not going to matter, which you could have that experience. Or are you going to make a choice to choose to have your semblance of this thing called mattering? And whatever you choose is what you choose. And it's also going to dictate your human experience. So hopefully those ramblings make sense.
They make a lot of sense. And then it always goes back to like, but what do you want to experience? Because isn't that what it's really about, right? And do I really know? Okay, do I really know what I want to experience? And then, and I understand that apathy sometimes when you just get into that abyss and you think, what's the point of this experience? So how many times do those kind of thoughts run through our minds like throughout the day? I know for me it happens as well, and I mean I'm going off the deep end a little bit here, but what I'm really saying possibly is it's about choice, like you said. It's about the choice that we make right now, and maybe that's the only control we do have, even though on some level we think about manifestation, and if we go like a bit into that kind of arena just for a bit. Is it really that we're manifesting our lives? I'm just going to throw that to you for now, and then we'll.
Yeah, I've thought about this, and I've even sat in the experience of this. And I like to consider the world in paradoxes. And what we're kind of getting at right now is this distinction between fate and free will. And I think the mind of men and women, we want an answer. Like, I need to know, is it fate or is it free will? It has to be one or the other. It has to be black and white. Cannot be gray space, because then there's uncertainty, and I can't survive if there's uncertainty. Like there's all of us, right? And I found wisdom typically is in the tension of both of them. And it's like, well, can they both exist? Can it be both fate and free will? Could there be the possibility that when we're born, we're shot out of, let's call it like a cannon, and it's shot in a certain direction, and maybe we call that thing fate potentially? And if we study the Eastern philosophy and religions, we could look into karma and how all of that, and it's not actually a chaotic thing at all. You actually could see in the grand scheme of things of lifetimes how this idea, this concept of karma could be a real thing, couldn't be a real thing. I don't know. And if it is a real thing, then you could potentially see how it's orchestrated perfectly to when we're born to be shot out of a cannon in a certain direction. And then we kind of come into this human experience where we do have free will to kind of navigate in this little microcosm of the macrocosm of the direction that we're being shot. And if we would like to experience peace and maybe even this place of power and potential, we then finally just surrender into the flow of like, oh, I have been shot potentially into a direction and I don't have to control it. But what I can control is let me just take responsibility to choose good moment by moment by moment to the best of my ability, knowing that I'm going to mess it up anyway, but I'm going to try to do it imperfectly perfect. And by doing that, maybe we actually create this thing called an amazing life.
Wow, I love that. Yes, I love that, because it's always so different, because like we with our black white minds, it's always like it has to be this or that. No, it doesn't. So I love that, AJ. So on that note, I think let me change it a bit, because you're a coach, right?
I am indeed, yes.
And I love that responsibility, that deepness within you. Tell me a bit about how you help your clients deal with fear. Because that's like, and I know it's going off, but it's like so ingrained within us, this fear of whatever. Sometimes it's a fear of, I don't even know what I'm afraid of.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've experienced personally, and I've coached a lot of people and I've been with a lot of people, the mind is always carrying at a very, very deep, deep, deep root, even unconsciously. Am I going to survive? Right?
Yeah.
And so we could react to this on one of two ways. One is like, okay, I'm going to use willpower and I'm going to go on a mission to destroy fear, and I'm never going to be afraid. You can go down that journey. I don't think there's a bottom to it. You can gain some capacity to navigate fear, but I think there's this part of the beingness of being human, which is at an unconscious level, there's something in us that's constantly asking this question, at least unconsciously, am I really going to survive? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of this blessing and a curse, because it's a blessing because it allows us to like I don't know, not die at the age of whenever, right? Like it's keeping us in this earthly experience. And so on one hand, it's like, man, that's a gift. Then on the other side of that, it's like, well, it's a curse because it's like, I'm constantly less than my potential. So it's like, well, how do we then reconcile this tension? Meaning, can we just make fear our friend? Meaning, it just is. It doesn't have to mean anything about us. Now, our mind will want to make it mean something about us. And this is kind of, I think, if we want to dive into a little bit of Hindu philosophy, you have like the whole idea of Maya, illusion. And it's very sneaky and it's very subtle, right? And in Christian scripture, they talk about it, at least in my frame, it being the devil or Satan, and how it's roaming around like a prowling lion, and which I find fascinating. And it's like, well, maybe that's just part of our psyche is the way I kind of relate to it. And every single human being, or Maya, or illusion. And it is sneaky and it is subtle. And it can take these things of fear and then it can morph it and wrap it and being like, well, see, this means this about you, because if you weren't afraid of this, then you would be this. And then when we can start just like zooming out of that and just watching all of the thoughts, and we connect to what is, which is like, yeah, I feel afraid. That doesn't have to mean anything about me. It could just be an experience I'm experiencing, or a part of me, if we even want to come out of this moment further, a part of me is experiencing fear. Okay. Well, now it comes back to personal responsibility. What is it I choose? Do I choose to be afraid, or do I choose to be loving, or do I choose to be proud, or do I choose to be brave, or do I choose to be courageous? No right or wrong, but now it's coming back to personal responsibility, where we are being the captain of our soul a little bit, where we are choosing to rise beyond our fear and carve out our life simply because we choose to, not because we have something to prove or defend based upon our traumas and our past experiences, but rather coming back to a full-on personal responsibility. This is just what I choose because this is the next experience I would like to experience.
Now, I love that, okay, because that's where it is, right? For me as well, it's at that kind of level. But I've felt it, and it was speaking to a lot of a lot of other people, to people that are on different wavelengths almost. This is difficult. I don't want to. It's not a judgment thing, but it's going to sound like that, okay? Where you had another point where, how do you take responsibility? And then how do you get over that judgment? Because you have to get over that hurdle where it's like, you know what, you're not that great. What's your problem? Or why are you so stupid? Or, those terrible thoughts that we have in our heads before we get to the point where we say, hey, you know what, we are responsible for our thoughts.
Yeah, well, this comes back to what I feel like people, if they're going to be free, one of the biggest parachutes that they have to cut the ties to is caring what people think about them. There is no freedom at all if we're carrying around this, I call it like a parachute. It's like when we care what people think about us, whether it's God, whether it's our mother, our father, our grandparents, our religion, society, like when we're like, I can't make decisions because I'm afraid of what people think about me. It's almost like running up a mountain with a parachute tied behind your back. Can you do it? Yeah, you can do it, especially if you're gritty and tenacious. You can do it for as long as you want to do it. But what may be possible for you if you just cut the ties to the parachute and you just walked up the mountain? And there's a paradox, because there's a place to arrogantly be like, I don't care what people think about me, and I'm just going to march on with life. That's a possibility. There's another possibility to not care what people think about you, while also loving them, where you're like, you're living in the question of like, well, what is this feedback? Is this something that's true or not true? And so if there's empowering feedback for us, we could gather the lessons from it and we can still go on. But it's no longer this parachute that's holding us back. And I've coached a lot of people, and some of the biggest breakthroughs that I've led people through was cutting that parachute of typically the 5 people that they have a deep, deep respect and love for, where they finally stand face to face with those people and can look them in the eye and say, I love you, and I do not care about what you think of me. And it's one thing to relate to that way with other people, which is a brilliant way. But one of the things that people also have to cut the tie to is relating to themselves that way. Can we also embody the paradox of, I love myself, meaning I can accept myself in the full spectrum of possibility for myself. And again, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my emotions, so I don't care what I think or feel. This is what I'm choosing to do to move forward. When somebody can embrace that paradox, that's when I have found they're free to be themselves and ultimately going on the journey to embody their potential, carving out their life however they choose to carve it out.
Wow, I love that too. And now I have to just take it back for a second and say, it's always more difficult. I always found, right, growing up and, being the person that I am now, but finding that it was always so more difficult and I was always so much more judgmental towards myself, right, than to other people. So I could be loving, and I know people say, like, how can you be loving to others when you're not loving to yourself? But it's sometimes easier to love someone else than to love yourself. How do you deal with that kind of paradox?
Yeah, it's I would say it's a paradox until it's not. And so it's like, and this is a tricky one, because it's like, is this paper yellow? And I guess it would be dependent on somebody's colorblind. For me, it's yellow. For you, yes. Is it yellow? Yes, it's yellow.
Yes, it's yellow.
Is it a judgment? Did we judge that this is yellow?
No, it just is, right?
It just is, right? So this comes back to answering this question. How does one love someone like themselves? Can we just connect to the truth? It is what it is. I am being lazy. I am angry. I am an asshole. I am a bitch. I am all of it. Like, I am all of my shadows and all of my light. I am it. Mm-hmm. Now the mind, if we connect to truth, it doesn't like it based upon what we make it mean. But if we follow this possibility of, like, I can connect to the truth, I'm safe, I can be here for me and connecting to the truth. The paper is yellow. It is what it is. Now, yes. Can we surrender to the experience of what is and notice what's present for me? And can I use my breath to be with it and move it and just be in the experience beyond judgment? And if so, well, now I can come into this third step of like just creating outcomes. And so what I have found is, like, in the game of somebody being themselves and breaking through their fear and finding freedom and carving out their path of life, life itself will completely revolutionize us. It will completely refine us if we're willing to be courageous enough to allow the mirror to refine us. Meaning, I'm willing to connect to the truth. It is what it is. I can discipline my mind enough just to be like, it is what it is. Let me surrender to the experience of this moment. And then let me take a level of responsibility to choose how I want to respond, to go forth and create outcomes. In this process, for me anyway, and for a lot of my clients, life itself then teaches them how to love themselves, meaning accept all versions of them, both in their shadow and their light, where they are ultimately just guiding themselves back home to them embodying who they are and what they're here to do. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. I love it. I love it. And I'm going to just hone in on just for a bit about home. We spoke a bit about that before our show, before we started recording. And it's a very interesting concept to me, because, a lot of times you think, oh, I need to find home. And for me, I could never find home. I was never at home, no matter what. I was always like, I don't feel home. And of course, I'm just taking it just a different level, because I'm taking what you were saying, that is, again, a choice. But I never felt like I was home. I came to San Diego and I felt, oh, I'm at home. And then you realize that, where is home anyway? So I'm going to just throw that back to you as well, because you were talking about, maybe I'll find home in Scotland or wherever I'll find home. But where is home really?
Yeah, like if I look at a physical place to live, I feel home in Texas. I've traveled a lot of places. I feel home in Ireland. I feel home in England. I haven't been to Scotland yet. We're going there next summer. I may feel home there. I don't know. I've been to Romania. There's parts of me, I like Romania. I don't feel home there. I've been to Mexico. I like Mexico. I don't feel home there. So maybe it's just an epigenetic link to where I've been potentially, and that's what it feels home. But when we're coming back to this idea of me being home in myself, for many, many, many years, I never felt home in me being me. And it typically was because I was just had all this unconscious stuff going on, where I felt like I needed to prove and defend and earn my right to exist.
Yes, yes.
Since I've burnt through a lot of that, through a lot of the work I have, I finally feel home, where I feel complete. And in some spiritual circles, you may have heard, or people listening to this right now may have heard, like, you're right now, you're perfect, whole, and complete. And you're moving to the next version of perfect, whole, and complete. Now, for many years of my life, that never made sense to me at all. Like, I'm like, well, I don't feel perfect. I don't feel complete. I feel inadequate. I feel unworthy. I feel afraid. I feel shy, like whatever. But that was true for me. When I had the courage to embrace that experience without judgment, then there was like reconciling that to now. I'm like, I feel as whole and as complete as I could be. And I also know there's an infinite degree of whole and completeness for me, and it's going to unfold as it unfolds.
Yes.
And for me, it comes back to this idea, this concept of unconditional love. For many, many, many years, the way I related to loving of myself and loving of other people's was very conditional. Well, if I show up and win, I will love myself, meaning I feel connected to myself. If I do not show up and accomplish, well, then I'm judging myself as being this or that. So now I do not love myself, meaning I'm disconnected from myself. And so the more that I become connected to myself, the more that I feel whole and complete. And I think this is why so many people struggle with self-love, is because love is this feeling. And I think this is, at least in the West, it's indoctrinated in culture. Well, love is a feeling. You're in love, you're out of love. I find this very fascinating personally, because really what people are saying is like, I feel connected to you. I don't feel connected to you. But they wrap it in this guise of love, which isn't love at all. Love is really like unconditional acceptance of the entire spectrum, right? Like if we look at any type of religious figure, and again, this isn't about Christianity, we're just talking about principles here. We could look at a being who embodied it, at least in stories, and we could look at Jesus. He embodied unconditional love, and you can read about it in the stories and see the way that he related to people and the way that he related to himself, the way that he related to God, and he, according to stories, embodied this thing called unconditional love, which becomes an amazing model then to guide us back home of like, oh, wow, interesting. Could I choose to relate to myself from that frame? And if I did, would I then be free to just be me? That's a very interesting question to live into.
Yes, it is. It is. And I'm going to throw that back to you because, of course, it's find freedom, right? And freedom, of course, is something that is tangible for some, but it's a very like nebulous kind of term because everyone sees it for whatever they see it at that moment, right? And it changes, of course. So have you found it? And is it really about finding it anyway, or is it there all the time? We just need to uncover it.
Yeah, great question. My experience has been, it's been there the entire time, 100%. And I was asked a question by one of my coaches, I don't remember the year, maybe 2016, 17. His name's Jeremy Eugene Wilson, good friend of mine. And he kept asking me, what do you want? What do you want, AJ? I was like, I just want to be free, man. I just want to be free. And he's like, free from what? And I was like, I just want to be free. And he's like, free from what? And I really had to sit with that because I'd never really considered it, because so often when we want to be free, well, then what are we trying to escape from? What are we trying to break free from? Because to what you're saying, it's like, well, isn't freedom just, isn't it there already? And we're actually uncovering that we're already free. And so based upon the judgments of our own mind, then we're not free. And now this is begging for me the question of like, yes, I feel absolutely free. And if I'm not careful in the freedom, I become very bored, because then I'm constantly living in the question of like, well, what do I want to create? What do I want to be? What do I want to carve out? I could choose literally anything, any possibility within the confines. I mean, I guess I could say, well, I want to be a professional, I don't know, NFL running back. And I guess I could pursue that journey if I really wanted to. Probably not the best use of my body type and my gifts and talents, but it is what it is, right? So part of this is like coming back to connecting to the truth of what's really true for me. But within that, it's like, well, what is it I choose? Because if I don't make a choice, then I'm just going to kind of be this ship who's just floating on the waves in the ocean of life. And then would I die having regrets, meaning, man, I never felt like I grabbed the wheel and sailed in a direction. And I regret that I didn't captain this ship, this gift that I've been given that's called life. And so it's great that people want to experience freedom, and freedom comes with a cost, which is like, well, now that you're free, what is it you choose? And many, many people do not know the answer to that question. And
yes,
typically they're terrified to make a choice.
Yes, it's always that. So if someone comes to you, if you're really honest with yourself and you say, okay, well, so you've got this freedom, right? You can do anything you want. You can have anything you want, whatever it is. What do you want? And then it's like, oh, I don't know. Like, wow, there's anything. I can have anything. What do I want? And then does the fear creep in, really? And does the freedom go away? Or is it like also, again, just something that's just nebulous and one kind of weird thing in our heads?
Exactly. I experience it as being a weird thing in my heads. And here's probably the greatest lesson my daughter's taught me thus far. My daughter's 4.
Yes, I love it.
And so when I watched her being 2 years old or 18 months old, she would move from thing to thing to thing. She still moves to thing pretty quickly. But she would go to coloring for 5 minutes, put it down, going to play with this toy for 7 minutes, put it down. And so she's constantly bouncing. And as I witnessed this, I was like, wow, what a gift. She's trusting herself so deeply that beyond thought, she's letting this wisdom beyond her lead her from desire to desire to desire to desire. From, I guess another way we could look at this is experience to experience to experience. She was experiencing color. Something in her says, I don't want to color anymore. I want to go play with the yellow truck. So now she's experiencing the yellow truck. And there's this wisdom in her that's moving from experience to experience to experience beyond judgment. Now, bridge this back to being a responsible adult. You can do anything you want. What do you want? Well, I feel like I just want to pet some yellow paper, right? And people's like, well, do I want to do that for the next 30 years? I don't know. So maybe I don't. Maybe I need to really think this out to figure out what it is I really want, rather than trusting ourselves. And maybe it's a process. For me, it has been a process to come back home to the possibility of, can I just trust myself that if I want to sit here and look like a fool petting some yellow paper, like I can love myself looking like a fool on this show, like petting yellow paper. Like it doesn't mean anything about me. Or I think I would like to experience putting on some chapstick. And so can I trust myself that life, even in me, is going to move me from desire to desire to desire, and it's going to unfold in its own brilliant timing that's actually going to be of service to humanity. I know this is crazy a little bit. It's a little far out for people to think and consider. But my experience has been, since it's been their desires, their ability to trust themselves to choose what they want, it's been repressed and suppressed so long, there's this huge unconscious block in, I can't trust myself to choose. When that's the fear, that's the Maya, that's the mind, that's the subtleness, this fucking it up again, taking away the freedom. Where again, we can come back to choice of being like, I hear that, no, I really want to pet some yellow paper. And so here we are petting yellow paper again. And then I can trust myself. As we start to develop that muscle, we start coming back home where the desires start to unfold in a brilliant way, where you start culminating wisdom to use this combination of your skill sets and your genius and your talents and your own innate wisdom, where you start being of service. Where you're finally kind of back in the flow to speak, but not back in the flow where you're not taking personal responsibility to choose. You're trusting yourself to be like, yes, I'm going to do my very best to choose this thing, and let's see where it goes. Let me embrace the adventure of that. Another story, just to anchor this further, there's a great book called The Way of the Wizard by Deepak Chopra. I don't remember what year it was written in. Really good book. I really enjoyed it. And in that, it's all of these allegories about Merlin and Arthur. So it's just a fictional story. It's nothing crazy. It's a short book. And there's this one chapter, I don't remember what the chapter's name was or what chapter in the book it was, but it was all about desire. And so Merlin wasn't there, but Arthur was there with his brother, and I don't remember the brother's name at that point in time. And Merlin had made 3 objects appear, and he had told Arthur, he's like, these are the 3 most important objects, like your biggest desires. And on the bed, there was a doll made out of corn husk, a slingshot, and a shard of mirror. And Arthur's brother was like, why would Merlin like make these objects appear on your bed? These are like meaningless. I mean, we're adults, and you have a doll, and you have a slingshot, and you have a shard of mirror. And Arthur, in all of his wisdom, was like, well, this is actually very interesting to me, because when I was a child, this corn husk doll was like my greatest treasure, my greatest desire. And I remember playing with it, and it was so wonderful. And then I remember one day in the woods, I made a slingshot with Merlin, and I no longer played with the doll, but I used the slingshot, and I hunted squirrels, and I had so much fun exploring the woods. And at one time in my teenage years, I found this broken shard of mirror, and I no longer played with my slingshot, and I was looking at this mirror to make sure I looked nice for the girls. And he goes, and looking back, each one of those desires led me to who I am today.
Yes.
Which then lands the point of like, well, can we surrender to life itself, trusting ourselves to really trust our desires, trusting that each one of our desires is like these little bread crumbs that's ultimately unfolding us and the life that we want to experience. Is this making sense? I know this is a deep conversation.
Yes, no, it does. It makes so much sense, and I can see it because I love it. It resonates so much because, again, it's about the judgment, society judgment. Because no matter how much you work through all that stuff and you love yourself and you don't judge or whatever, there's always at some level, depending on what day you're having or whatever, sometimes that judgment comes up, and it's always like, oh, you know what? I really just want to meditate today. And it's like, no, my brain's going like, no, how dare you do that? Like, how can you dare take that time? You should be doing this instead. So then it's like, then you force yourself to do that. And then you wonder why things aren't flowing in your life. And that thing that you try to do doesn't work out because it's not done with you and the trust you have within you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And this comes back to what we're talking about. It's like, how deeply can we actually trust ourselves to choose? I was doing a medicine journey at one point in my time. This was 2000, I think it was 2018 or maybe it's 2020. I think it was 2020. And I felt led to go into Native American reservation land to do this journey. And I wrestled with it for like 6 months because I was like, no. But it wouldn't go away. So I was like, all right, I'm going to trust. I'm going to go do this journey. And so a friend of mine went with me, and we drove up to like the border of Oklahoma and Missouri in northern Oklahoma, and we found reservation land. And I went on this journey. And I had intentions and all of that good stuff. And in that journey, I was stuck inside this loop where I could be anything I wanted to be, and anything I thought, it would just completely manifest itself in form, at least in my mind's eye. It would. If I thought of myself in a Viking, it was like, boom, I was a Viking. If I thought of myself as an octopus, boom, I was an octopus. Like anything I could think, it would manifest itself in form. And I remember just sitting there laughing. And I was stuck in this loop, I think, for like 2 or 3 hours. It's like, and the question kept from what I would say is God or the voice inside me is like, well, what do you want to be? And I'm like, I don't know. I could be this. 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 And it went on and on and on and on. And eventually 2 or 3 hours in, I chose. And to this day, I don't remember what I chose, but I remember the feeling of it. It was like, I chose, and like the movie ended, and it was like, congratulations, you chose. Go walk it out now. And I remember thinking back on that and laughing because I was like, what if everything I experience in physical form is a representation of God himself still trying to figure out what he wants to choose? And it's just expressing is all of these things. And maybe that's the big cosmic joke, that even God himself doesn't know what he wants to ultimately be. And this is what's created all of time and all of form. And then so here I am wrestling with this same dilemma. Well, what is it I want to choose to be? And it's like, just choose, just make a choice. Trust yourself to go from desire to desire, and let it unfold as it unfolds.
I love that story, and it's so funny. I don't know. I read it somewhere, or anyway, where it's like, you know what, God, it is a cosmic joke, because after all, there's that saying that says, "Man plans and God laughs." I think it's Japanese. It's a Japanese. It doesn't matter where it comes from right now. But what I'm saying is that I can actually see this. It's like, oh, you know what? I'm so bored. Everything's so perfect here. Let me play a bit. So. Go, humans, go and play. And we come here and we take life so seriously, because, life happens, right? Totally. But what if we start playing more and make those choices to play, or to just make one choice? Because I resonate as well with what you said. Like, oh, I want to be a writer. I want to write. I want to do this. 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 So just make a choice. So.
Yeah. And this is kind of what I would call the divine fuckery of it all. If I'm not careful, I'll get into a judgment of, man, that person right there, they're so serious. They're so relentless. Can't they just lighten up? Can't they just play and have some fun? When if I zoom out, I'm like, well, what if they came to experience life as this very serious, relentless thing? And maybe that's them feeling alive on fire. And maybe I just want to experience some lightness and playfulness. And maybe it's all perfect.
Yes. And maybe we really are. It's just us here anyway. We just mirror each other anyway, right? So by some, I don't know. I don't even know. We just came together and had this conversation. But there's no coincidence, right? But on some level, maybe we just drew it to get, okay, yes, it becomes all very complicated, but also very simple, right?
It does. And even, we could throw this whole conversation up to divine providence or coincidence. And we also could say, well, it was very intently created. At some point in time, you had a desire that came through you that says, I want to create a podcast that's all about breaking free and finding freedom. And the intention was then set forth. And now here we are in this moment in time having this conversation that is actually relevant to that topic.
Yes. And I have to go back to that, because that's exactly what happened. It's like, it shows you how things just come. I was listening to a mentor of mine, and he was saying, well, what do you want to talk about? Like, I've always wanted to do a podcast, right? And then it just came to me. It's like, break fear, find freedom. That's just like part of what my life's been all the time. And it just, okay, so I was coaching someone, an author, and I said, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? And it just starts like that. So, yes. And is that random, coincidence, or synchronicity? And does it really matter?
Exactly.
Or they're just words.
Exactly.
Oh, AJ, I'm really enjoying this conversation, but maybe we should go talk a bit about, so from here, from everything from us, possibly one of the most important things that I've discovered as well for me is community. With what happened a few years ago with COVID and all the isolation, I think we've realized that community is so important, because we need that connection. We humans, we need to connect. We need to see the web of life. We need to experience life. And how are we going to experience life? We can't experience it on our own. We have to experience it through relationships, right?
Yes.
So tell me a bit about Social Glow. Let's
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that's what's brought me into choosing to be a brand manager for Social Glow. I've coached for a long time, 12 years. I still coach. And I was actually coaching the CEO of Social Glow when he came up with this idea of hey, I want to create a community, a software platform that helps people create highly engaged communities where it's not, there's no censorship and there's no algorithm, because he was really getting fed up. He has another software business where people were creating communities on Facebook, but they were not able to lead their communities in the way that they wanted to lead them. There's all of like, okay, well, I can say this, I can't say that. People were getting banned. People like had these huge groups and they disappeared overnight. Or if they did have a way to keep their group, right? The Facebook gods didn't smite them. Well, then they had to serve the algorithm rather than their community, because then,
Yes.
in all social media, you have an algorithm. And so he created a platform that was like, cool, we're going to allow people to create and lead communities the way that they want to lead them. No censorship and no algorithm. And so that's I was like, dude, I would love to come in and consult and like kind of be at the helm of leading this software company, because I can see moving forward. To your point, it's like we cannot do life alone. People are hungry, so hungry for legitimate community. And so many people are building, trying to build community and Discord or on Circle or on School, but it still is a means of just kind of like, we gather people, we fulfill a business, but there's not like this warmth, vibrant, relational community. And so that's what's kind of led to the creation of Social Glow. And we're constantly living in the question of what features can we create? What features can we build to equip coaches and course creators and membership owners with the tools to actually build like a relational based community where people feel warm, people feel invited, they're able to freely exchange information and ideas without having to be banned or anything of that nature. And that's ultimately what's led to this thing called Social Glow.
Oh, I love it, because that's exactly what it is. It's like you start this. I started a group a few years ago, maybe last year or whatever, and it's like, what do I do? Do I try and fight this Facebook group and try and maintain it or just say like, okay, I don't like giving up, but sometimes something just needs to be, because there's no interaction, there's no realness within it. It's all so superficial. And so I'm loving this, that you're actually getting down and allowing people to be who they are, because that's exactly what I think we're all craving for. Because, like social media is great to connect with people, but it's so superficial. You can't connect with people on a real level.
Yeah,
so how do you do that?
Well, so the way I do it is I love creating micro communities, like small communities. So rather than thinking like, okay, well, I have to have a community that's feeding 10,000 people or 100,000 people, it's like, well, could you like slow down and create like a micro community that's serving people on a specific topic? So we have a lot of fitness users who are using Social Glow to run like a 6-week boot camp where they're helping people lose weight. So a lot of their clients, number one, they don't want to be on Facebook. They're like, hey, can we like be on a platform where we have community and we're gaining access to the content and we're doing this together, but we don't have to be on Facebook? And they're like, sure. And so they're using Social Glow to do that. But notice it's around a very specific thing. It's like, you want a 6-week challenge to lose weight. Here's a way to deliver that. And then one of the features of Social Glow that we've created is this thing called gamification, where when people join the community, we give them points. When they comment, we give them points. When they make a post, we give them points. And so what this has allowed community leaders to do is to create like a very fun, engaging way to reward people for the very thing that they want to do in the first place. And so it's a win-win for everybody. People are collecting points for getting the results that they paid and that they said they wanted to get. And then the admin is like, I finally have more people doing what I need them to do. Now, on a business model level, what I also thought through and what we created was what we call like an incentivization path. So it's like, well, it's great that you're building community, you're building relationships, or rewarding people for doing these things. But what's the point of having all these points if they can't redeem them for anything, right? It's almost like going to Chuck E. Cheese's in America and you get all of the tickets from playing all the games, but you have no prize counter. I mean, it doesn't make much sense. And so brilliant coaches and membership owners and course creators are using it like, well, you could use these points to redeem them for our live event or for sweatshirts or hats or coffee mugs or money back on the program that you bought, or 1 month free. Like there's so many different ways to think through how to use incentivization. And so that's been a really fun thing that we're doing with Social Glow as well.
Wow, I love it. So you've thought about everything. And for me, I've always loved gamification as well, because it's always, you have this idea, you start this thing, but people, it's always, how do you keep people engaged really and not get bored or fall off, and you can carry them for so long, but there's only one person, right? So it seems like the gamification seems to have to do exactly that. It keeps people engaged. So wow, that's it sounds really, really exciting, and I love the name.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yes. So how long have you been doing this?
So Social Glow has been live in this current version for about 10 months now. Yeah, about 10 months. October will make 12 months. So yeah, we're coming up on 10 months right now.
So it's nearly your anniversary.
Yeah, nearly, yes.
So that's very exciting. How do people find you anyway?
They can just go to socialglow.com. They can find it. Other than that, they can find us over at YouTube or Facebook. We ship a ton of content. And so that's how people are finding us.
That's very cool. And now I wanted to ask you, you mentioned something about a book earlier. And of course, we always, all of us, we're like, you have to have a book because it gives you credibility or whatever it does. Why did you write your book?
Yeah, great question. When I wrote my book, I didn't feel like I needed credibility. I'd been coaching, 8 years or something, and had a very profitable business before I even wrote the book. I just felt like I wanted to write the book. I felt like I needed to share some of the lessons I had learned. The name of the book is called Unstoppable Beacon. You can find it on Amazon. It became an Amazon best-selling book. And it's all about how to maintain your center in the chaos and really unlock freedom in life and business and embody your potential. And so, yeah, even at the very beginning, you'll open the book, you'll read the introduction that I said I felt like God told me to write the book. I really felt like something in me was just like, write the book. And so I did. And I had developed all of these frameworks from myself, what I would say being like an unstoppable beacon, being a beacon of light. I mean, even during COVID and all of the craziness is probably going to continue to ensue over the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. We can still choose, no matter what happens, no matter how fearful it gets, to still be that beacon of light, that beacon of hope, that beacon of inspiration. And that's just a choice. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? I die. I have no control over that. I'm going to die at some point, I mean, I can do my best to be responsible for honoring my life, but I also don't have to sit here and pay attention to all the news and all the doom and gloom. I can choose to live. And that's what for me, that's what that book is all about, is really inspiring and equipping people with the tools to actually live. And unfortunately, so many people, myself included, I was never taught how to really live. Like, I had all these concepts around life, but concepts around life is not experiencing life. And so it's like, well, what is really reality? Some would say, well, reality is we can touch it, we can see it, we could have consensus around it, we have beliefs around it, maybe. And so then it's like, well, what's unreality? And people usually, if you pull back all the layers, it comes back to, well, unreality would be an experience. Well, then you kind of start flipping it and you're like, well, what's really true? And people always land, if you push enough, they're going to land on, well, the only thing that's really, really real and that's relevant to each person is this thing called experience, which much of society, as we've been taught and ingrained to believe, is unreality, when in truth, it's actually reality for every single one of us. And so now that comes back to being like, okay, well, what are the skill sets? What are the mindsets? What are what I would call the body sets, meaning our ability to have emotional intelligence and be with emotions and process emotions? So we're the ones doing the emotions aren't doing us. How do we start living in the experience of life? And from that place, sourcing our own safety, sourcing our own well-being. In that place, no matter what happens, and I could fabricate the most atrocious thing that I could ever think of, I'm still responsible, no matter what happens outside of me, for how I choose to experience this experience. And that's something that no human being or natural disaster or anything outside of me could ever take from me. And by that, we really do start becoming unstoppable beacons of light and truth and inspiration.
Wow, I love that. I just want to ask you one question here out of that. How do you do responsibility? How do you know when you're responsible?
This is a great question. For me, it comes back to, what are your values? Not what your mother or your father or society. What are the values that you choose to uphold? And are you living in integrity with those values? If you say yes, and it's a genuine, authentic, like, yes, I'm imperfectly, perfectly doing my best to be in integrity with my values, then who could I be to tell you that you're not being responsible?
Wow, to show that. And then we'll take it another step further. How do I know what my values are?
Yeah, so one of my favorite experiences, and I give this to a lot of my clients, it's like, just go Google like top values, and you'll find websites that will give you a list of like 50 or 100 of words, right? And so I would encourage you just to block off some time, maybe 2 or 3 hours, and really just like kind of tune into the body, take a few breaths, and scan the list of words and pick 20 of them where you're like, yeah, I feel like these words, joy, wealth, freedom, vitality, like different things for different people. But trust yourself to pick 20. And then from that list of 20, do something which I would call like a contrasting value exercises. And I'm a big fan of like thinking in extremes, because when we think in extremes, it typically helps us get really clear. And so let's say somebody's like, yeah, well, wealth, that one's important. Health, that's another one that's important. I'm like, okay, great. So imagine this. You can be wealthy, meaning you can have the most money, the most time, the most lavish experience you could ever think about, but you're laying in a hammock with maggots eating off your legs. You have no health. Do you still want wealth? Some people may say yes, and I'm not even going to say it's a wrong thing. This is just a very extreme way to get really clear on what they value. For me, I'm like, ugh. Okay, let me flip it. I could be absolutely poor, but I feel vital life flowing through my bones, and I feel really good in my body, but I'm very poor. I'm gonna choose the health for me personally, right? And so if you start doing this, you're like, okay, well, health becomes my top value. Yes. And I can go further and be like, okay, well, I'm vital for me. I'm vital. I'm healthy. I have a healthy body, but I'm not connected to what I would call God or life itself. I'm just absolutely disconnected, but I do have a healthy body. For me, I'm like, ooh, well, that one's now slipping. For me, connection is going to be a higher value than health. So if I keep doing this, I will start distilling all of this list of 20 values, and I will come up with my top 5. Well, now I kind of have this North Star to start asking myself, am I embodying this? No judgment, just a simple question. Am I connecting with the truth? Is this yellow paper, right? Am I embodying connection? Am I doing what's required to be connected? Yes or no? Not a right or a wrong, but if I really value connection, well, that's going to start driving my behaviors if I'm going to take on this game of personal responsibility to be in integrity with the values that I feel to uphold. And so the way I experience this, it's almost like values is one side of a riverbank, and integrity and unconditional love is another side of the riverbank. And it starts creating these riverbanks for this life force known as Anthony John Amyx to flow through. And it ebbs and flows just like a river. Like if we look at something like your Grand Canyon, that thing has been built over millions and millions of years. And as the river is flowing, it's pulling bit by bit by bit of the sandstone, and it's moving, and it's created its unique flow. What if our life is no different? But often we haven't taken the time to get clear on what are our values that we choose, and taking on the game of integrity and unconditional love to then allow this life force that wants to flow through me to express itself. And every 2 or 3 years, it's wise to assess, hey, are these values still relevant? I know for me, they've ebbed and flowed and shifted as I experience life, no different than a river. And this is, I can look back and be like, this is my river. It is what it is.
Beautiful, a beautiful metaphor, and I can see the river and I can see all these things. So thank you for that. And then I'm going to ask you another question. How about, I know we've already asked it, and I'm going to just ask it again. How do you find the freedom within?
Yeah, great question. The freedom within for me has been taking on a game of personal responsibility of looking at, like, where am I resisting something? And then connecting to the truth of that, and then surrendering to experience it. And then by doing so, that has given me the freedom to create outcomes as I choose to experience them, as I choose to create them.
Wow, that's probably a beautiful place to stop. You know what, AJ, I could possibly speak to you for the next 3 hours, and maybe we should do a series on this, because it's like such beautiful stuff. I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. Thank you so much. It's like an hour, I guess. I'll have to end the show, unfortunately. Thank you so much for being here. It's beautiful. I've loved this on every level, and connecting with you. So if anybody wants to connect with you, I don't know, as Social Glow, as a coach, because I think you must make the most extraordinary breakthroughs with your clients. Where do people find you?
Yeah, just go to socialglow.com. Simple. Yeah, just go to socialglow.com and you can learn everything that you want to learn there. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, AJ. Have a beautiful day in Texas, wherever it is, whatever the sun shines like. Hopefully it's not as hot there anymore as it was a few months ago. And we'll see you soon.